The stars above the space station looked calm that day, but inside the dining hall of the diplomatic cruiser Silver Path, tension stirred under laughter. Jake, young human technician with grease on his sleeves and a crooked smile, was just finishing repairs near the power coils when the alien girl walked in. Her name was Zella, a diplomat's daughter from the proud and mysterious Verakai species. Tall and silver-skinned, with bright violet eyes that sparkled like stars. She was royalty, everyone whispered, born from an ancient line of telepaths and warriors. But today, she didn't act royal. She acted playful. "Is it true you humans love silly games?" she asked, standing across from Jake while sipping glowing blue juice. Jake smirked. "Only if we win." That made her laugh, a soft sound like chimes in a soft wind. "Then let's play a game," she said, tilting her head. "Guess my true name, the one hidden by my ancestors." Jake raised an eyebrow, wiping his hands with a cloth. "And what do I get if I win?" She grinned, her voice light but filled with mischief. "If you guess it, I'll marry you." The whole room went silent. A spoon dropped, a whisper spread, and even the guards turned their heads. Jake chuckled, not understanding the weight of her words. "Deal," he said, shaking her hand. But Zella's smile faltered for a moment, just a flicker, because among the Verakai, guessing a royal name was not a joke. It was an old rite, an unbreakable vow. One of the alien guards immediately left the room, whispering into a small cum device. Jake noticed but didn't care. He liked her laugh, her challenge, and the strange warmth in her voice. Later in the corridor, his friend Mina, a translator, grabbed his arm. "Jake, are you crazy?" She hissed. That was not a joke to them. "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "Her true name is sacred," Mina said, eyes wide, and "if you guess it, it means you've claimed her under Verakai law." Jake blinked. "Wait. What?" "She's of the old blood. Her name holds power, memories, destiny," Mina whispered. "That was a test, and now you're inside it." Jake looked down the hall where Zella had gone, her silver cloak disappearing around the corner. The game had begun, but it wasn't a game at all. That night, Jake sat in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep, his mind buzzing. What was her real name? Why did she look so calm, and yet so sad when he accepted the challenge? He remembered how her fingers trembled just a little as she handed him a data crystal. "For your efforts," she had said softly, "start here." Inside the crystal were stories, songs, and lost fragments of Verakai culture. Jake didn't know ancient languages, but he started listening anyway. One song caught his ear. It was sung in a soft voice, filled with longing. The words were broken, missing pieces, but one line repeated, "Xa lana, shalana." Was that a clue? He wrote it down, saying it out loud slowly. Somewhere deep in the ship, a sensor blinked in response. Just once, unseen, Zella stood on a balcony, her eyes looking at the stars, but her mind listening to him. She had not expected this, not truly. Others had joked before, but none had cared to search. Not like this, not with honest curiosity. Her name was more than letters, more than sound. It was bound to history, pain, and secrets no human had ever touched. And now, a human this strange, greasy, kind man was whispering pieces of her soul without knowing what it meant. The path had begun, and Zella, for the first time in years, didn't feel so alone. The stars kept shining as if nothing had changed. But the game had started, and the universe was listening. He had only smiled when he accepted her challenge, but now Jake realized the whole ship was watching him. The next morning, 2 alien guards stood at the entrance of his room, their armor black and glowing with blue lines. "You are summoned," one said with no emotion. Jake followed them through the silver halls of the Verakai vessel, eyes following him from every corner. Whispers trailed behind him. in alien tongues and human guesses. They led him into a quiet chamber filled with golden light, where a tall figure waited her father, the High Speaker. He stood like a statue, long robes flowing, his face covered with a carved metal mask. Jake bowed slightly, unsure of what to say. The High Speaker's voice was low and sharp. "You spoke the ancient vow before witnesses." Jake blinked. "It was just a joke, to you," the alien leader said, "but among my people." It was the first binding. Zella stood beside her father, silent, her eyes locked on the floor. Jake saw her fingers clench slightly, like she was scared or angry or both. The High Speaker stepped closer. "If you walk away now, we will erase the moment and your life will continue unchanged." Jake looked at Zella. "And if I don't walk away, then you must complete the trials of name." The High Speaker replied, "3 trials that test the body, the mind, and the heart." Jake hesitated, his heart pounding. Why is her name so important? Zella finally spoke, her voice softer than ever, "Because it holds my story." The High Speaker nodded. "You are allowed 1 day to choose." They left him alone in a chamber with soft walls and floating lights. He sat on the floor, thinking, remembering how she had laughed at first, but her laughter had faded. He wasn't trying to win a marriage. He just wanted to understand her, to know why a name could matter so much. Mina, his translator friend, found him later, sneaking in through a side hatch. "They say you've been marked," she said, sitting beside him. "You're a subject of Verikai law now. What happens if I try the trials and fail?" He asked. "Then you forget her name forever, and her people will block all contact with you," she answered. "They'll erase your memories of her, if needed." Jake looked away. "I don't want to forget." That evening, he made his choice. In the Hall of Winds, before the elders and ship crew, Jake stood beside Zella. "I'll take the trials," he said clearly. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Zella didn't move, but something in her eyes flickered, like a storm held deep inside. The High Speaker raised a hand, and a scroll floated down from the ceiling, unfolding in the air. "The first trial begins now, Qua," he said, "and it starts with silence." Before Jake could speak, the scroll lit up. Kea, and a strange hum surrounded him. His body froze, his breath stopped, his voice vanished. Suddenly, he stood in a glass room filled with thousands of glowing cubes, each one spinning slowly in the air. A voice echoed inside his mind, not his own. "Only by feeling the truth can you find the first sound of her name." He reached out, touching the nearest cube instantly. Memories filled his Hedlian cities, battles, sorrow, love, rain falling over burning towers. Each cube held part of Zella's lineage, her people's emotions, the wounds and triumphs. Of generations, Jake touched more, each time feeling closer to something. One cube pulsed gently in his hands, and a name echoed faintly inside it, like a whisper, X-E. It wasn't the full name, but it was a start. Jake turned, and the glass room dissolved into silver mist. He stood once again before the alien council, and sound returned to his throat. He looked at Zella and said softly, "The first sound is Z." A deep chime rang through the hall. Zella's eyes widened, and even the High Speaker stepped back in surprise. "You have passed the first trial," the elder said slowly, but Jake didn't feel victorious. He felt like he had just stepped into something much deeper. Later, as he rested in his chamber, a soft knock came at the door. It opened slowly, and Zella stepped inside. "Alone, you surprised me," she said without smiling. "No one ever got that far." Jake sat up. "I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to understand you." She looked at him, long and silent, then nodded. "There is more to know," she whispered. "Much more." Then she turned and left, her cloak vanishing around the corner once again. But this time, Jake didn't feel alone. He had passed the first gate, and the next would come soon, and far above. The stars continued to burn, watching their silent promise take shape. The next day came faster than Jake expected. He didn't sleep much, only dreamed of stars, glowing words, and Zella's violet eyes watching him from far away when he stepped into the trial hall. He was alone. No guards, no elders, no Zella. Just silence and a glowing white floor. A new voice echoed from the walls. Different from the high speakers, smooth and ancient. Welcome, seeker of names, to the language chamber. Before Jake, the room shifted, and thousands of floating symbols appeared. Some spinning, some pulsing with dim light. They weren't in any known language. But Jake recognized the shapes from the stories in the data crystal Zella had given him. The trial had begun. The true name, the voice said, is hidden in the soul of your bond. Find the pieces, but only if you feel, not read. Jake stepped forward, confused. Feel, not read. He reached out to a symbol glowing bright green, but the moment he touched it, a cold wind rushed through the room and knocked him backward. Wrong. He stood up and tried again, this time reaching for a soft purple one that pulsed like a heartbeat. When he touched it, a memory not his own entered his mind. A young alien girl standing in a rainstorm, staring at a burning house, her hands clenched, her voice silent. He gasped, stepping back. That was her Zella. As a child, this room wasn't just to test it was her past. Every symbol was a window into her story. He moved carefully now, choosing the ones that felt warm, heavy, or full of sadness, avoiding those that felt cold or proud. He saw her as a child locked in a tower, her teachers whispering about duty, blood, and silence. He saw her as a teenager, sitting alone, watching the stars. Drawing human ships on the glass walls of her room, he touched another symbol, and suddenly, she was older, wearing a battle suit, looking at her reflection with eyes full of questions. Jake's heart hurt. This wasn't just about winning a game anymore. This was a girl who had no one to speak her true name out loud. And now, he understood why the challenge had meant so much to her. In the center of the room, one symbol shone brighter than all the rest, deep blue with a golden line running through it. He hesitated, then placed both hands on it. His body froze, and the voice returned. You have found the second sound. In his mind, he heard it clearly. La, X-E. La. He whispered, and the chamber responded with a soft, musical tone. Suddenly, the walls opened, and Zella stepped inside, her eyes full of disbelief. You reached the center, she said quietly. Even my cousins failed there. Jake turned to her, sweat on his forehead. It wasn't about the symbols, he said. It was about what they felt like. She stepped closer. You saw it all, didn't you? He nodded. I saw you. Her face was calm, but her eyes glistened. She didn't say thank you, but she placed a small glowing stone into his hand, a token only given to someone who had touched the heart of Verakai memory. I never meant for the challenge to go this far, she whispered. But now I can't stop thinking about what it might mean. Jake looked down at the stone, then back at her. Then let's see where it goes. A soft smile appeared on her lips, the first real one since the challenge began. Then, like always, she turned and left through a narrow doorway. But this time, she paused just once and looked back. That night, the ship's lights dimmed early. But Jake stayed awake, staring at the stars through the small window in his cabin. He said the two sounds out loud again, See-La. His voice was quiet, but something in the ship's core responded. A hum, soft and ancient, vibrated through the walls. Unseen by all, deep within the ship, a locked vault opened one notch, and far across the galaxy, an old beacon pulsed for the first time in centuries. The trials had awakened something not just in Herb, in the universe itself. Jake had passed the first true test, but the next one would not test his mind. It would test his body and his will to survive. And Zella. She was beginning to believe, even if she didn't understand why. The bond had started to grow, and neither of them could turn back now. Jake woke up to heat. Not just warmth, but choking, burning heat that wrapped around his body like a living thing. He wasn't in his cabin anymore. He was lying in a dry crater under a twin sun sky. Surrounded by red sand and cracked rocks, a voice echoed across the air, distant and cold. This is trial to fire and flesh. Jake stood slowly, the air thick and dry, his clothes already damp with sweat. All around him stretched a desert moon known as Varith's Scar, a place feared even by the Verikai. There was no shade, no water, and no direction. Survive 3 suns fall, the voice said, or be forgotten. Then silence. He looked around, no supplies, no tools. Just a broken metal spear, half buried. In the sand, Jake laughed bitterly. Great, just perfect. He pulled the spear out and began to walk, choosing the direction where the sun looked lowest, hoping to find anything shelter. Food, a clue. Hours passed and the heat only grew worse. His mouth was dry, his lips cracked, and his boots filled with sand. He remembered Earth deserts from school, but this was worse. 3 suns meant triple heat, triple death, and triple pain. Suddenly, he spotted movement on a ridge. A creature tall, spiked, and limping, its skin like lava stone and its breath steaming. It hadn't seen him yet, but it blocked his path. Jake crouched behind a rock, heart pounding. He could fight, but with what? A rusty half-spear. Then he noticed something strange. The creature was wounded, dragging one leg, side, leaking silver blood. It wasn't hunting, it was dying. Jake took a risk, stepping out slowly with open hands. The beast growled, but didn't attack. He spoke. Softly, "I'm not here to hurt you." The beast tilted its head, confused, then sat heavily in the sand. Jake approached carefully and broke off the sharp end of the spear. Laying it down, the creature growled again, but didn't move. Then Jake reached into his jacket and pulled a cloth, using it to wrap the wound. He wasn't sure why he was doing it. Maybe because the trial said flesh, and maybe because he wasn't. Like the others who came here just to win, he wanted to connect, to understand. The creature slowly blinked, then let out a deep rumbling sound almost like thanks. Later that night, the temperature dropped quickly, the heat turning into bone-deep cold. Jake and the creature huddled near a patch of warm stone. The stars above shimmered, and Jake looked up. Thinking of Zella, was she watching? Did she know he was still alive? In a distant room aboard the Verikai vessel, Zella stood alone before a glowing orb through it. Allah. She could see flashes of Jake's movements, hear faint whispers of his voice. She watched as he helped the desert beast. When others would have run or killed it, her fingers touched the orb's surface. Her breath held tight. "I didn't think he'd last a single sun," she whispered, back on the moon. Jake woke to the sound of deep growls. 2 new beasts had appeared. Circling them, their eyes glowing, fangs sharp. The injured creature stood, blocking Jake, ready to fight. Jake knew they wouldn't win a battle, not without a real weapon. So he did the only thing he could. He roared, swinging his broken spear and rushing forward. It was stupid, reckless, but it worked. The 2 beasts backed away, surprised, unsure. Then, they vanished into the sands. Jake collapsed, gasping, and the wounded creature nuzzled his arm once before turning and walking away into the night. When the 3rd sun finally fell, Jake stood tall at the edge of a ridge, his clothes torn, his skin burned, but his spirit unbroken. The voice returned, deeper this time. "You did not dominate. You did not destroy. You endured and showed mercy. A beam of light surrounded him. Lifting him from the moon's surface, he awoke back on the Verakai ship. Inside a quiet chamber lit with soft gold, Zella was there, sitting beside him, her expression unreadable. "You survived," she said quietly. "Barely," Jake replied with a weak smile. "But I made a new friend." She looked down, then placed a smooth fire-colored stone in his hand, the second token. "You passed the trial of flesh," she said. "Not by strength, but by heart." Jake sat up slowly. "What does that mean for the name?" Zella met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't turn away. "It means," she whispered, "you're closer than anyone's ever been." He held the token tightly, not because of the trial, but because she had handed it to him herself. Outside the ship, unknown to them, an old war sensor deep in the system activated. Something ancient had detected a Shifta human unlocking the gates of a royal name. The next trial would not be about beasts or language. It would test the deepest part of him, his feelings, his truth, his connection to her, and Zella would no longer be able to hide what she truly felt. The stars were gone. Jake opened his eyes and saw only black, no light, no sound, no ground beneath him, just endless darkness. His body floated, weightless, cold, and alone. Then came a voice, soft and deep, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "At once, you have passed the trials of mind and flesh," it said. "Now comes the trial of the heart." Jake tried to speak, but no words left his mouth. Instead, visions began to form around him, ghostly images in the dark. He saw Earth. First, his childhood home, the face of his mother before she passed. His younger sister laughing in the kitchen. Then, the scene changed. He stood again in the desert of Vareth Scar, watching himself wrap the wound of the injured beast. Then came Zella, walking toward him in 1,000 different moments, smiling, teasing, crying, alone. But then the vision changed again. He saw her standing in a great hall, dressed in royal robes, tears running down her face as guards pulled her away from someone she loved. Who was that? Jake whispered, finally finding his voice. No answer came, only more images. Zella on her knees before the elders, her voice trembling. Why must I carry a name I cannot speak? She was punished, locked away, her memories bound, her true name sealed inside her mind where no one could reach it until now. Then Jake found himself in a glass room. A real one this time. He stood on one side, Zella on the other, separated by a transparent wall. Her eyes were full of sorrow, but also something. Deeper fear. Why are you afraid of me? He asked softly, placing his hand on the glass. You're getting close, she whispered. Too close. He stepped forward. That's the point, isn't it? She shook her head. You don't understand what my name means. Then tell. Me, he said gently. Tears welled up in her eyes. My name. It's not just a name. It's a key. A key to what? Jake asked. To power. To war. To old promises made in blood. She whispered. If you speak it fully. The law binds me to you. My people will no longer be mine to guide. Jake paused, the weight of her words sinking into him. I don't want your people, he said. I just want to know you. The glass wall cracked slightly. She looked up at him, voice shaking. Then speak the next sound. If you truly feel it. Jake closed his eyes, remembering all he had seen and felt. Xe. La. He whispered, then waited. Then, slowly, he added, Ray. The final sound echoed in the dark, and the room around him shattered like glass. He fell forward, but landed gently on warm stone. Around him, starlight returned, soft and golden. And in front of him stood Zelenot, a vision this time. But truly her. She looked stunned, her voice caught in her throat. That is my true name, she said, barely a whisper, Zilarai. The name shimmered in the air, and ancient symbols appeared around them. Floating in a circle, the universe itself seemed to pause. Holding its breath, Zella walked to him, slowly, her voice trembling. "How did you know?" "No one has ever spoken it." Jake smiled gently. "Because it was never hidden from the one who cared enough to feel it." Her hands touched his, and for a moment, the world around them became still. Then the golden light turned red, and alarms echoed across the ship, far above them on the edge of known space. Old machines stirred. By speaking the full name, Jake had awakened something locked for centuries. A royal key had been used, and somewhere, old warships powered up, waiting for their queen to command them again. Back aboard the HFY ship, the high speaker stood frozen before a screen showing Jake and Zella together. He whispered to himself. He did it. Guards ran down the halls. Sensors flared, and in the heart of the ship, ancient codes were being rewritten. But Jake didn't care. Not now. Zella was no longer hiding, no longer bound by silence. She smiled for real this time, her voice clear. "I'm not afraid anymore." Jake held her hand. "Neither am I." Behind them, stars began to shift. The third trial had ended, but their true journey was just beginning. The joke was never a joke. That truth settled over Jake like a heavy storm as he stood beside Zella in the glowing chamber. He had spoken her full name. Solarion, unlocked a law older than her empire. Alarms had stopped, but the silence now felt even louder. Outside the chamber, ships moved, alien commanders sent warnings. And the HFY fleet was shifting its course, all because a human had done the unthinkable. He had spoken the name. Zella's hand was still in his, but her eyes looked far away, deep in memory. "I never meant to say it like that," she said softly. "I was tired of being watched, of being royal, of carrying rules in my bones." Jake didn't speak, not yet. She took a breath, her voice shaking. "When I joked about marrying anyone who guessed my true name, I meant it as a rebellion, a little fire in the cold." Jake finally asked, "So why me?" Zella looked at him, tears touching the edge of her voice. "Because you were the only one who didn't treat me like a statue." "I was just being myself," he said. "I didn't think it would change the galaxy. It already has." A deep voice said from the chamber door. The high speaker stepped forward. His mask removed for the first time. He was older than Jake had guessed, eyes like iron but tired. "You have invoked the law of bonding," he said. "Zilla is no longer just a daughter of the lion. She is now bound to you. And by law, you share her fate." Jake held Zella's gaze. "Then, I'll stand with her." The high speaker studied him in silence, then turned to his daughter. "You always knew this might happen." She nodded slowly. "But I didn't know it would feel like this." Behind them, a hologram appeared, an old recording from centuries ago, showing a HFY woman standing beside a human man. Both smiling, both surrounded by war. This was the last time a human spoke a royal name. The speaker said it ended in war, betrayal, and silence for generations. Jake watched, heart pounding. "You think we'll do the same?" "I think the galaxy always fears what it does not understand," the elder replied. "But maybe this time, something will be different." Zella stepped closer to her father, her voice stronger now. "Then let us choose differently, later." That night, alone in her private garden chamber, Zella sat beside Jake under artificial stars. The room was quiet, filled with soft green light and trees that whispered with alien wind. Jake finally asked, "What does your name truly mean?" Zella looked up at the glowing ceiling, her voice gentle. "It means hope returned." He turned to her, surprised. "My name was given to me by my mother before she died in the last war." She continued, "But after her death, the elders sealed it, said it brought danger, so I lived with a false name, Zella." She smiled sadly. "I was never allowed to say it out loud again." "Until you did," Jake felt a chill run through him. Not of fear, but of understanding. "All this time," he whispered, "you were waiting for someone to remember you." She nodded, and I didn't even know it. He looked at her, truly. Looked and said her full name again, gently Zellerai. This time, she didn't flinch. She smiled, softly, purely, like a storm had finally passed. And then she whispered, "What if I don't want this to be a trial anymore?" Jake leaned closer. "What do you want it to be?" She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she answered without fear, something real, that night. No alarms sounded, no ships moved, and no laws were broken further. But something much deeper had shifted, not in politics, but in two hearts sitting under an artificial sky. Elsewhere, in a dark corner of the galaxy, a masked figure watched the old codes activate. He spoke into a device. "The name has been spoken. Prepare the old fleets." Back on the Verakai ship, Zella and Jake sat in silence, unaware of what was now moving through space. But for once, they didn't worry, because they had finally shared more than a name. They had shared truth, and the universe had heard it. The stars outside the Verakai ship were no longer calm. They flickered like warning lights, uneasy, restless, as if the universe knew something ancient had returned. Jake stood on the observation deck, his eyes locked on the distant glow of old. Engines powering up in forgotten corners of space. Zella joined him, her steps quiet, but her presence warm. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "They're coming." Jake turned to her. "Who?" "The remnant houses." She said, "The old families who swore revenge if my true name was ever spoken again." Jake clenched his fists. "Because of me." She shook her head. "Because of us." Behind them, the Verakai Council met in panic. Old codes activating weapons, shields, and fail-safes that hadn't been touched in hundreds of years. The High Speaker stood before the council, his voice steady. "The law was fulfilled. We cannot deny the bond." "But they'll see it as rebellion," another elder shouted. "They'll bring war. Then let them." The speaker replied, "Let them see what unity looks like elsewhere." Ships entered the system dark, ancient warships with red cores and jagged holes. Moving like ghosts with purpose, they came not to talk, but to test. And they had one message: surrender the human and seal the name, or face destruction. Jake heard the broadcast while sitting beside Zella. He looked at her calmly. "We knew this could happen." "Yes," she replied, "but I didn't think you'd stay this long." He smiled. "I guessed your name, didn't I?" She didn't laugh this time. Instead, she leaned closer, forehead touching his, her voice trembling. "Then let's face them together." On the main deck, the Verakai ships formed ranks, but they were outnumbered. Jake walked forward, now wearing the robe of a bonded one, black with gold trim, a symbol of the law he had completed. Some aliens still stared at him with doubt, with fear, but others began to bow, because no one had ever passed all three trials and spoken the full royal name without a drop of blood spilled. Jake wasn't a warrior, but he had done something greater. He had listened, cared, and endured. Now he stood beside Zella, not as a stranger, but as her equal. The enemy fleet arrived in formation, ready to fire. Jake opened a channel and spoke into the void. "I didn't come here to take power. I came here because I wanted to understand." The line remained silent. Then a cold voice replied, "Understanding doesn't erase old wounds." Zella stepped forward, her voice firm. "Then see this with new eyes. My name was sealed by fear, but now it lives in truth," Jake added. "If you still choose war, then know this: we will not run." A pause followed, heavy and long. Then the enemy flagship powered down its weapons. One by one, the rest followed, like ripples across a still pond. The galaxy had expected a fight, but found something stronger: courage in connection. Hours later, after the danger passed and the fleets withdrew, Jake and Zella returned to the garden chamber. The stars above now looked brighter, clearer. Jake sat quietly, thinking about everything: the trials, the pain, the bond. Zella knelt beside him, her fingers tracing lines in the soft, mossy floor. Then she said, softly, "Do you remember when I laughed at you?" Jake chuckled. "Yeah, you told me I could marry you if I guessed your name." She looked into his eyes. "Serious now? You did guess it?" He nodded slowly. "But I didn't expect you to mean it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small gold ring with alien script glowing faintly. "This belonged to my mother," she whispered. "It was given to her by the only man she ever loved." Jake's breath caught in his chest. "Zella?" She didn't laugh, not this time. Instead, she placed the ring in his palm and said with full voice, "I choose this path, not because of the law, not because of trials, but because I want to." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes as he held the ring close. "I never thought an alien girl joking about her name would change my life," he said, voice shaking. "But I'm glad it did." Above them, the ship's system pulsed once, gently, as if even the stars themselves had given a small nod of approval. The bond was complete, not by force, not by tradition, but by choice. And in the quiet that followed, two lives, two worlds, and two hearts finally became one.